Hi everyone, welcome to this Q&A session with the producers of Nightmare Industry, which is the new superdoc about Italian horror cinema.
The big idea is to tell the ultimate story about Italian horror cinema, which is something that has fascinated both of us from a young age. It's inspired us in our professional lives. I myself started a Blu-ray label called Fractured Visions with the intent of helping to expose these Italian horror classics to a new audience. And the big idea for us, which we find fascinating and exciting, is having the filmmakers themselves tell this story.
The intent with this project is to really put together all the pieces of the puzzle and tell a more in-depth, bigger story than has been told up to this point. I mean, Italian horror, of course, counts a great deal of fans, but really, up to this point, we've been just moving around the dark room with a flashlight, and nobody's really shone the light upon the bigger picture. Really, what makes Italian horror so special is the fact that it needed, uncompromisingly so, to challenge the Americans on their own turf. And this really pushed them to find different narrative solutions, non-linear narrative, strange and sometimes experimental color schemes, push, of course, the envelope as far as violence is concerned and what could be shown on screen. So really, the Italian market and industry, as far as horror is concerned, had to it was a bit a challenge of David and Goliath. And in many cases, the Italians were able to reinvent the genre and inspire American filmmakers. So really, yes, it's about the small country that could and did.
To echo what Eugenio said, it was just the willing and the daring of the filmmakers to go places that no other country would go to. I mean, once you get in deep into Italian horror, the stuff you'll find is so wild, so crazy, and just it will blow minds to think that these films were actually made.
That's awesome. I mean, I want to sort of dive into a bit more of what Nightmare Industry is all about. So could you sort of tell us about Nightmare Industry? What's your vision for this, epic 4-hour plus documentary experience?
So Nightmare Industry is the story of a group of filmmakers, legendary filmmakers like Lucio Fulci, Ruggero Deodato, Dario Argento, Umberto Lenzi, Sergio Martino, Joe D'Amato, the who's who of Italian horror, basically. And it's the deep dive into this army, because these guys weren't always friendly. There was some bitter rivalries during this period. Everyone was competing to make these movies. So it's an expose of what they were doing filmically, but also what was going on behind the scenes. So it'd be a celebration of their successes, their failures, not to mention the entire controversy that a lot of these films brought, the legal actions that were brought against these filmmakers, and finally the impact that they've had on horror cinema.
That sounds amazing. I mean, and also the films themselves. How are you planning to explore the films themselves? Because there's so many iconic movies, that have come out of this genre. What's your approach with that?
There are indeed many, many, many films, especially if we consider the multiple undercurrents of the horror genre, because Italians really touched upon every possible aspect of the genre, and we find sometimes subgenres that overlap with other genres and approaches: Nazi exploitation, rape and revenge films, women in prison, eco-vengeance films, and of course cannibal movies. And in the case of cannibal movies, for example, the Italians invented that.
Yep, so we're talking gothic horror, we're talking giallo, we're talking post-apocalyptic, we're talking zombies, we're talking cannibals, we're talking everything that the Italians touched. Italian horror has been my passion really since I was in high school, man. I mean, My love goes way back. Basically, we want to share this passion with other passionate fans and other horror fans who may not have found that passion yet, but when they discover this documentary, they're going to find out just how charming, wild, and crazy these films are, and will hopefully join the cult.
It is really by assembling all these different perspectives on the industry that I think we will get a picture that is basically has never been put together. It has never been shown, and the clock is ticking. And in a few years, to do what we are setting out to do won't be possible anymore. So there's also a time factor.
How do you want the audience to feel? They're sitting down there watching this opus on Italian horror cinema. How do you want them to feel?
Well, for me, it's two things. I want them to be entertained. I want them to have fun, because that's what Italian horror cinema is all about. But I also want them to walk away enlightened. So I want them to learn a lot about what went into making these incredible movies.
Yes, go around with a new perspective on these films that sometimes have hidden meaning and more layers than what one would expect. So enlightenment and entertainment, those are the key factors.
I love what you guys have put together. I'm really excited to share it with fans, to get their feedback. But my sort of one input into this is I want this to be very nostalgic. I want this to really elicit that emotion from the audience. So they'll be learning, they'll be part of making history, literally. And all of those things are very, very important. To kind of wrap things up now, I just want to sort of say to everyone, this project cannot happen without you. And the next steps that we want you to take is please read the treatment. And then there's a survey below that. It won't take very long, but we really want to hear from you. We want to hear about what you like, what you don't like. If you want to make changes, to find out whether you would even support this project. Understanding that from our perspective is vital to the continuation of pursuing this project. So the way I look at it is if the universe wants us to make this, it will happen. And this is your first opportunity to really feed into it.
We want to make the ultimate documentary about Italian horror cinema. And to achieve that, we agree with you. We need feedback from fellow Italian horror fans and horror fans in general. Italian horror cinema is so broad, the canvas is so broad that the possibilities for discussion is almost endless. So helping us refine and shape that is very important to us.
Italian horror is so embedded within the collective imagery. If you've liked James Wan's last film, if you've liked Last Night in Soho by Edgar Wright, those films dig their hands deep into Italian horror and the Italian imagery, from Mario Bava to Dario Argento. So really, if you stop and think about it, you are probably a fan of Italian horror, even if you just thought of yourself as a fan of American horror. So yes, this documentary might be for you, even if you don't realize it right away.